app.
Hi everyone, I'm Nicole Killian coming to you from our Washington, D.C. bureau. And we begin tonight with the death of Queen Elizabeth II. She was 96 years old, on the throne for 70 years. She was Britain's longest reigning monarch. Buckingham Palace announced that she died peacefully at Balmoral Castle in Scotland. Members of the royal family rushed there earlier Thursday when the Queen's health took a turn for the worse. The flags were at half-staff at the British Prime Minister's residence on Downing Street in London. They were also lowered at Buckingham Palace. With the Queen's death, her son Charles automatically becomes King of the United Kingdom and the head of state of 15 other countries, including Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. We want to take you now to Washington, where President Biden is signing the condolence book at the British Embassy here in Washington. Let's watch.
Am I able to write a message?
If you would like to, sir.
I would like to.
And while we watch President Biden sign a condolence book at the British Embassy here in Washington, the First Lady standing by his side, I want to bring in CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, tell us more about how the White House is mourning the Queen's passing.
Well, Nicole, good to be with you here. Let's listen to the president. Oh, no, he's good. OK, so what you saw there, he had removed a piece of paper from his lapel and appeared to be writing down whatever was on that into this condolence book at the British Embassy, which is right next door to where the vice president lives here in Washington. Let's listen to him now.
We're so delighted we got to meet her. And we were joking with her. She actually provided. Can I walk over there?
Yes, I'll take you over, thank you. We have British and American.
Forgive the shaky quality of the video and the audio on this. The piece of technology that the White House pool is using is such that probably didn't get a good signal quite there in the embassy. They'll what we call refeed it later, and you'll get a clear look and sound of it. But essentially, this happened, of course, so quickly and stunned the world in that it happened as fast as it did, that much of Washington was caught off guard by this. We waited all afternoon to get a sense of what the president might exactly end up doing to commemorate this beyond the written statement he issued earlier today and lowering the flag here at the White House to have staff. A short while ago, they announced he would be stopping at the British Embassy, which, as I said, is next to the vice president's residency in upstate or upper northwest Washington. He's on his way now to a Democratic Party function over in Maryland. And earlier in the day, he had issued a written statement on behalf of himself and the First Lady in the United States, in essence, essentially saying that the Queen was more than a monarch. She defined an era. And in a world of constant change, she was a steadying presence and a source of comfort and pride for generations of Britons, including many who've never known their country without her. He recalled the fact that they met in 1982 when he was part of a Senate delegation to the United Kingdom, recalled that they met twice last summer when he was in the UK for meetings of the G7, and also called out in his statement that he looks forward to continuing a close friendship with the King and the Queen Consort, King Charles III, as he is expected to be called, and Queen Consort, Camilla, of course, his wife. No other word yet on how exactly the world and the United States will pay tribute, but there's an expectation that the president would lead a delegation to the funeral whenever it is held in London. Otherwise, though, as you saw today, pretty standard statement of condolence from him and recollections of the time they spent together. He was the 14th U.S. president Queen Elizabeth met with over the course of her 70 years on the throne.
I think 14 that she reigned during and 13 that she met. And to your point, Ed, you know, I think really the world is in shock and trying to process that. It looked like the president even was a little visibly struck as well. So tell us more about the relationship that he had with the Queen.
Well, no U.S. president really had a terribly close relationship necessarily with the Queen because he didn't necessarily meet her that often. The British leader they would have dealt with most, of course, is a prime minister, not necessarily the Queen. But I was struck last year when he was in Cornwall and met with her that he said, and he meant no offense, that the Queen reminded him of his own mother, both in look and in the way she composed herself. President Obama had said something very similar years before when they were at the commemorations for D-Day in Normandy, that the Queen reminded him of his grandmother. And all the presidents, at least in modern times, who had met with her recalled that they appreciated her straightforward manner, the fact that she kind of gave it to them straight, had a good sense of her presence in the world and the importance of her leadership. Met with Biden, hosted state dinners for Presidents Obama and Trump, was hosted here for the last time in 2007 by George W. Bush, who held a state dinner in her honor. She visited the White House 4 times. The first time in 1957, when Dwight Eisenhower took her to a college football game in Maryland as part of her first trip to the United States as Queen. She was here to mark the bicentennial in 1976 and danced with Gerald Ford at a state dinner that was held in her honor, and was known to ride horses with Ronald Reagan when they were in the UK. They both shared a love of that. So she understood the value of the special relationship. The presidents, just like many other world leaders, relished the opportunity to be seen with her. And all of them today who are still living have issued statements of condolence and remembrance.
Yeah, and how are some of those former presidents paying tribute to the Queen?
Let's read from former President Obama and Mrs. Obama's statement, for example. They say in part, she listened deeply, thought strategically, and was responsible for considerable diplomatic achievements. And yet she wore her lofty titles with a light touch, as willing to act in a comic sketch for the London Olympics as she was to record-steadying messages for the people of the UK during the COVID-19 lockdowns. The Obamas saying they were lucky enough to come to know Her Majesty, and she meant a great deal to them. Back when we were just beginning to navigate life as President and First Lady, she welcomed us to the world stage with open arms and an extraordinary generosity. Former President Trump, in a statement from himself and his wife Melania, saying, quote, "She will always be remembered for her faithfulness to her country and her unwavering devotion to her fellow countrymen and women. Melania and I will always cherish our time together with the Queen and never forget Her Majesty's generous friendship, great wisdom, and wonderful sense of humor. What a grand and beautiful lady she was. There was nobody like her," former President Trump said in his statement. And that's a sampling of what we've heard from various American leaders today, most especially the presidents who spent time with her. Nicole.
And now that King Charles III is leading the monarchy, I know you mentioned there's not necessarily a close relationship there typically between a president and a monarch. But that being said, and I know this is all about continuity, could there be any impact on U.S.-British relations?
Well, if there are, they'll be conducted primarily through the Prime Minister, Liz Truss, who President Biden met twice with this week, although over the phone and in virtual meetings. There was a call that they held on Tuesday afternoon in which they discussed both the war in Ukraine and some other domestic issues, including ensuring that the Good Friday Agreement that essentially regulates what goes on in Northern Ireland now is maintained and sorted out as part of the Brexit deal. And then earlier today, just this morning, the president and other world leaders from the G7 and NATO were on a virtual call to discuss Ukraine, as the United States and other countries are giving even more monetary and military support to that country. The White House said that during that call, the president called out Prime Minister Truss and said that he and the First Lady were thinking about her and the British people and wished her well. That was just hours before word came officially from Buckingham Palace that she had passed. And that leaves now Prime Minister Truss as someone that President Biden is going to be eager to get to know. And their first face-to-face encounter may come at the Queen's funeral.
Good point. Ed O'Keefe, thanks so much. For more on this, Roxana Saberi joins us now from Buckingham Palace. She is a CBS News foreign correspondent. Roxana, describe the scene outside of Buckingham Palace. I know it's late there.
It is late here, Nicole, but there are still, well, you could probably say thousands of people are still out here today. The crowds have thinned a little bit, but still there are quite a few people, despite the dampness, despite the rain that has been coming and going all day long. People started coming out here this morning when they heard that the Queen's health was deteriorating, and they've been taking photos, videos. Some have been laying flowers. Many people just wanting to be here to pay their respects on this historic day. We spoke to a couple of Londoners who said they knew that the Queen was, aging. She's 96 years old, that her health was fragile, that she had mobility issues, but they still felt very much in shock. Now, I think the realization that the Queen has passed is starting to set in. Earlier this evening, we also heard the British national anthem, what we have long known as God Save the Queen, now called the God Save the King. There was a trumpeter playing and some people were singing along. Also, the flag, the Union Jack has been flying at half staff on top of Buckingham Palace here today, as it is and will be across the country on other public buildings. Nicole?
And walk us through the legacy of the Queen and the impact that she had after 70 years on the throne.
Yeah, 70 years, Nicole. And during those 70 years, she has become an icon here in the UK and across the world. She has been well loved. A recent YouGov poll here taken by respondents in Great Britain said about 75% of them like the Queen. They are the only, she is the only woman that they have, the only monarch that many Brits have known. About 80% of Brits have known. Also internationally, as I mentioned, she has been a figure that is well recognized, probably one of the most well recognized figures in the world. She has met 10 American presidents and been to the United States 5 times. So really, this is the end of an era and the beginning of a new one. Nicole?
Yeah, and I believe she's met even more than that. I believe 13 over the course of her reign. But what happens next for the royal family?
Well, Prince Charles, now King Charles III, is still in Balmoral, but he's expected to come back to London tomorrow, and he's expected to continue to plan for the funeral of the Queen, his mother. Also, he's expected to give a TV address to the nation. And we're also expecting a televised service of remembrance at St. Paul's Cathedral here in London that is to be attended by the Prime Minister, and other senior members or senior government members are supposed to be in attendance. The funeral we expect to be held at Westminster Abbey within the next 2 weeks, and there will be various events and activities that people can take part in. Businesses are expected to stay open at least until the day of the funeral, although some may shut before then, and even if they are open, you can just tell it's not business as usual. Nicole.
All right, Roxana Saberi, thank you so much for your coverage.
You're welcome.
For more reaction to the Queen's death, CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins me now. Scott, how are lawmakers remembering the Queen and her legacy?
And Nicole, in a moment when both parties can't agree on anything, there is some unanimity today in the condolences for the Queen. Republicans and Democrats both speaking not just about the scope of what she did, but the length and breadth of her reign. Let's hear from the Senate leaders on the Senate floor today.
She didn't just witness the great turns of history. She helped shape them over the 7 decades of her reign. And every step of the way, she was precisely the kind of leader the moment demanded. In times of hardship, she was both strong and comforting. In times of joy, she was gracious and dignified. She was a rock, the living embodiment of the virtues that lie at the core of the nation she so proudly led. I dare say we will never see a leader quite like her for as long as we live.
She guided venerable institutions through modern times using timeless virtues like duty, dignity, and sacrifice. She offered our contemporary world a living master class that it needed badly. Today, the Senate and the American people are joined with our dear friends across the ocean. We're joined in prayer. We're joined in grief and in gratitude for such a remarkable leader and such a successful reign.
Of course, the Queen took the throne at a much younger age than these senators took office. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina saying when she was 21 years old, the Queen famously said, "I declare before you all, my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong." There's also a statement from, as we continue the statement from Senator Graham, he adds, "As it turned out, she was blessed with a long life and kept her word to faithfully serve her people. Well done, Your Majesty. Rest in peace." As I mentioned, we also have statements from members of the U.S. House. From Virginia Senator Tim Kaine. Let's begin with the Speaker of the House. "Personally, it was an honor to be on the floor of the House during the Queen's historic address." Tim Kaine references the Queen's visit to Virginia, Jamestown in 2007, saying he'll remember the visit fondly. Members of Congress doing a lot of references to the experiences they had and the interactions they had with the Queen. But Nicole, it's just one of those singular moments, one of those increasingly rare moments where both parties are kind of speaking the same way.
And we know the Queen visited Washington. Are there any special tributes planned on Capitol Hill that we know of?
Well, let's begin with what the U.S. House has planned, likely a resolution of bereavement, which is something they do when heads of state or members of royalty historically have passed. Last done, I think, in this context for King George back in the 1950s. So that'll likely happen early next week when the U.S. House returns. The British Embassy in Washington and its massive embassy in Northwest D.C. has a condolence book open to the public to sign tomorrow from 9 to 5. So they're accepting Americans to come in, British citizens who live in the United States or living in the United States to come sign that as well. We expect more House speeches, Senate speeches through the week next week as the full Congress returns here.
And we know the Speaker also ordered flags at half-staff at the Capitol. I know it's still early, but do we have a sense of whether a congressional delegation may travel to the UK to pay their respects to the late Queen?
Well, yeah, the answer is going to be yes, just no firm plans yet. We caught up collectively with Senator Jim Risch of Idaho, who's a top Republican in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and he says there has been some discussion but no firm plans yet. It's not a matter of whether members of Congress go over. It's a matter of how many members of Congress go over, how many do so officially with an official congressional delegation, and how many just decide to come over on their own dime, in their own way, because they want to be part of this, want to pay their respects in person. So it's a matter of how large the delegation will be, not whether one will go.
All right, my colleague Scott McFarland, thank you so much. President Biden is one of 13 different U.S. presidents to have met Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. We will have more on her relationships with each president next year, streaming CBS News.
I cannot lead you into battle. I do not give you laws or administer justice. But I can do something else. I can give you my heart and my devotion to these old islands and to all the peoples of our brotherhood of nations.
Original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Mr. President, as we look to the future, I'm confident that our common values and shared interests will continue to unite us.
Very nice to see you again.
President of the United States of America, Mr. Obama. Your Majesty. Thank you so much for having us. So nice to see you. Thank you so much.
To the health, freedom, prosperity, and happiness of the people of the United States of America.
Mr. President.
They're all very excited. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Queen Elizabeth II met every president of the United States from Harry Truman to Joe Biden, with the exception of Lyndon Johnson. After meeting her in 1951, Harry Truman said Elizabeth captured the hearts of the American people. She traveled to California to spend time at the private residence of President Ronald Reagan, and President Barack Obama called her one of his favorite people. Joining us now is presidential historian Lindsay Chervinsky. She is the author of The Cabinet, George Washington, and the Creation of an American Institution. Lindsay, thanks so much for being with us. Tell us more about the historical ties between the White House and Buckingham Palace and how Queen Elizabeth helped to define it.
Well, we've all heard that phrase that the United States and Great Britain has a really special friendship, an unusual alliance in the world. And Queen Elizabeth really embodied that unique relationship because as presidents came and went, as her governments came and went, she was steady and she was there and she met all of those presidents. In fact, she met 30% of U.S. presidents who have been in office, which is just remarkable.
Agreed. And so with which presidents did the Queen enjoy a closer friendship?
Well, she was the consummate professional, so I don't think she ever really let on when she didn't like someone, but it seemed pretty clear that there were a few that were her favorites. She was very close with the Eisenhowers, she was very close with Ronald Reagan, and she seemed to really enjoy the Obamas as well.
And of the 13 presidents that she met, which encounters stand out to you as more significant from a diplomatic point of view?
Well, I think her visits with President Eisenhower were particularly important. They both shared a bond over their service in World War II. They shared a commitment to rebuilding the world after that tragedy. And so I think there was a lot of similarity there. They really understood each other, and they both enjoyed visiting their respective homes. In fact, she enjoyed Eisenhower so much that when he came to her estate at Balmoral in Scotland, she made him her secret pancake recipe and then actually mailed it to him because he enjoyed it so much. So I think that relationship is particularly special given the context of the time and the world that they were living in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would be interested to know what was in that recipe. She and President Reagan also shared a love of horses. How did that help define their friendship?
Well, there was nothing that the Queen enjoyed doing more than spending the afternoon on horseback. And I think the same could be said for President Reagan. So when he came to visit England, he actually scheduled his entire trip, including his visits with other heads of state and his visits to NATO, around an invitation to ride horses with the Queen at Windsor Castle, which is a pretty remarkable thing to choose to do. And they really bonded over that love, that passion for that activity. And so when she went to California to visit him, she had fully intended to go ride with him at his ranch, but they were unfortunately rained out. So we don't have pictures of them on horseback on his ranch, which would really have been remarkable.
Dr. Lindsay Chervinsky, thank you so much for being with us on this very sad but historic day.
Thank you for having me.
Leaders around the world are paying tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. Ahead, we'll take a look back at the Queen's role in global politics. You're streaming CBS News.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service and to the service of our great imperial family to which we all belong.
In a original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new.
Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
World leaders are honoring the life and legacy of Queen Elizabeth II. CBS News' Natalie Brand has more.
In the memory of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Reaction poured in swiftly from around the world Thursday after the palace announced concerns earlier about Queen Elizabeth II's health and later the somber news of her death.
Queen Elizabeth II was widely admired for her grace.
She is a legend.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tweeted, "Canadians will always remember and cherish Her Majesty's wisdom, compassion, and warmth."
I'm having trouble believing that my last sit down with her was my last. She was thoughtful, wise, curious, helpful, funny.
Here in Washington, the flag was lowered to half staff at the United Kingdom's embassy. U.S. flags were also lowered at the Capitol and the White House to honor the 96-year-old monarch.
The decades of her reign have seen a profound deepening of the special relationship between our two countries.
I dare say we will never see a leader quite like her for as long as we live.
President Biden, in a statement, said Queen Elizabeth II defined an era, saying in a world of constant change, she was a steadying presence.
Our hearts and our thoughts go to the family members of the Queen, goes to the people of United Kingdom.
As Britain's longest-serving monarch, she met with 13 U.S. presidents during her reign, including President Biden last year. Natalie Brand, CBS News, Washington.
As head of state, Queen Elizabeth II was close with a number of British prime ministers and world leaders. She famously got along with Winston Churchill and was a symbol of British resistance during World War II. But as head of the Commonwealth, the Queen's influence went well beyond the UK's borders. For more on this, Margaret Brennan joins us now. She is CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent and moderator of Face the Nation. Margaret, despite being head of state, the Queen had no official governance role and was not permitted to state her opinions publicly. How was she able to wield her influence on the global stage?
Well, you're right, Nicole. Unlike the monarchs, for example, of Saudi Arabia or Jordan, some of the Arab states who actually do govern the countries they rule, the Queen had a very prescribed role in which she was not to state her opinion publicly. And that deliberate choice on behalf of how the United Kingdom structured the modern understanding of their monarchy also served the purpose of allowing the Queen to have continuous relationships, no matter the political party in power at the time, and serve as that sort of source of unity among those British members of the public who do still support the royal family. So it's such an interesting role and rallying point throughout some difficult times in British history. But, you know, I was looking earlier at, I'm looking at it now, a speech that had been released by the British Archives back in the 1980s that had been written for her in the event of nuclear war, where she would go on the airwaves to reassure the public. It was a speech she never gave, obviously, because that awful eventuality never happened. But it gives you an idea that for members of the public, in these moments of crisis, she as a symbol took on more than just ceremonial, but somewhat of a rallying point for the British public. And so I think that is quite interesting and will be different, given that she had decades on the throne to sort of build that credibility with the public. Her son, Charles, has been well known, but certainly hasn't had that official role in the way she did or lived through the kind of very incredible periods of history that she was on the throne for. The past 70 years, if you think about it, have been pretty incredible in terms of reshaping the world order.
Yeah, it has been quite remarkable. She began her reign in the shadow of World War II, a time of national unity. She also ruled at times of significant strife within the UK, most notably Northern Ireland. What was her role in British-Irish relations?
Well, you know, Nicole, I mean, you know well how difficult the legacy of British colonialism is in countries around the world, in Asia, in India, in Ireland, throughout Africa, and in Ireland in particular. What she did in 2011 is seen as really a big turning point in many ways for British-Irish relations. She went and was the first British monarch to go to the Republic of Ireland since it became independent. It only became independent a few years before she was born. And those painful memories of hundreds of years of very bloody colonial rule, she came as close as any British monarch ever had to an apology. It wasn't one. She said it was sad and regrettable. But for people who had lived through so much history, including the Queen herself, it was a big acknowledgement to go and recognize the independence of the country, to recognize and acknowledge the pain, and also for someone who herself had suffered. I mean, it was her close relative, Lord Mountbatten, who was killed by the IRA, assassinated in a bombing in 1979 because of the symbol of the British monarchy and its ties to colonialism. The same Lord Mountbatten who had been the last ruler of India, which, remember, was not independent until, mid-1940s. And so those painful ties and association with the monarchy took on a different resonance when she went in 2011 and acknowledged some of this. And so today, the Irish Prime Minister released a statement really crediting her for, in that demonstration of some empathy and outreach, that it did help to begin to repair those wounds that are still felt today in the tension in Northern Ireland.
Walk us through the arc of some other significant global events and relationships in which she's been a pivotal player.
The past 70 years have been so incredible for us. And, you know, Nicole, when we talk about the remaking of the world order now, when we talk about what President Biden speaks about and the framing he uses to talk about democracy versus autocracy, he's referring to all of those institutions and orders that were set up during her lifetime. I mean, we talk about her coming of age in 1945, in World War II, and then coming to power years later. I mean, think about that. Her first prime minister was Winston Churchill. Her last, she swore in just a few days ago, accepted the credentials, I should say, of Liz Truss, the current prime minister. And in that period of time, you know, her family went from that symbol of resistance during World War II to, you know, having a very different relationship with the British public. But she has lived through so much and counseled what numbers of prime ministers, has met with 13 U.S. presidents from Truman to Biden, that period of time she's been in office, and so on the throne, I should say. And so it really is pretty incredible what she has lived through. And it is interesting that in this moment, as a symbol, as she passes on, it comes at a very painful moment for the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom has been an empire in decline for some time, but in this moment, it is struggling with this ugly divorce from the European Union, ongoing tensions in Northern Ireland, an independence movement in Scotland that's bubbling up again, very significant that she chose to go to her favorite spot in Scotland at Balmoral. Is that a statement? You know, happening at a moment when you have inflation at 40-year highs in the United Kingdom. They have the highest annual inflation rate of any developed economy, any G7 economy right now. They're on the verge of recession. They have an energy crisis because, once again, war has come to the continent. And so it is painful right now. You have this identity crisis and this economic crisis. And so it's interesting as the country goes into some degree of mourning that it is at this period of time where that symbol of, you know, a rallying point of unity is not there. We will see if King Charles III steps into that symbolically for the public. But as you know, the popularity of the monarchy has been declining in recent years.
Margaret Brennan, thanks so much. I'm sure we'll continue to follow this in the coming days, weeks, and, as you mentioned, years. During the Queen's 70 years on the throne, there were many history-defining moments. Tanya Rivero joins us now with a look at a few of them.
Things looked a lot different when the Queen took the throne in 1952. Her reign has been filled with many firsts and historic moments. Here's a look at just a few of them. Now, she was the longest reigning monarch in British history. With 70 years on the throne, the only monarch who came close to her was Queen Victoria, her great-grandmother, who reigned for 63 years. Queen Elizabeth reigned during 14 U.S. presidents, starting with Harry Truman. Queen Elizabeth met almost all of them except for Lyndon Johnson, since she was pregnant with Prince Edward at the time. And to give her reign a little bit of scale, imagine this. She had ruled for 17 years by the time astronauts landed on the moon. She ended up welcoming the crew of Apollo 11 to the palace after they made their historic trip to the moon. She was in her first year of her reign when Joseph Stalin died, and 65 years old when the Soviet Union collapsed. And on the pop culture front, the Beatles formed in 1960, 8 years into her reign. She later made the band members of the Order of the British Empire. She even had some of the bandmates over in the years after their split. So you can see that Queen Elizabeth lived for nearly a century of history. Such a remarkable life. Nicole?
Yes, quite a legacy, Tanya. Thank you. Queen Elizabeth's historic reign impacted life beyond the boundaries of the UK. Coming up, more on the late Queen's tremendous reach throughout the Commonwealth. You're streaming Red and Blue.
We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. we will meet again.
When weather turns extreme,
The 150-mile-per-hour hurricane is still churning north.
every second counts.
Massive and rapidly intensifying.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
CBS News and extreme weather. Feel the forecast. An original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.
Conservative Christianity and Republicanism have grasped hands in a way that's very unhealthy.
There are churches whose members have divided over partisan politics.
How an evangelical civil war could change the spirit of America.
This was a heavily Christian-influenced attack.
When we have the ability to say that God is on our side, it allows us to justify all kinds of cruelty.
An original CBS Reports documentary, streaming now.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared. People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
When weather turns extreme,
The 150-mile-per-hour hurricane is still churning north.
every second counts.
Massive and rapidly intensifying.
CBS News and the Weather Channel bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
Well over 9 feet. This is not survivable.
You'll have time to get prepared.
You want to have the advantage on severe weather days.
It just may save your life.
CBS News and extreme weather. Feel the forecast.
As we've been reporting, Queen Elizabeth II has died at the age of 96. Buckingham Palace issued a statement saying the Queen died peacefully at Balmoral, her residence in Scotland. CBS's Ian Lee looks back at her life.
Even into her 90s, Queen Elizabeth II kept up her royal duties. She became the longest reigning monarch in British history in 2015.
Inevitably, a long life can pass by many milestones. My own is no exception.
Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor was not in line to be queen, but in 1936, the 10-year-old princess nicknamed Lilibet was put on the fast track after her uncle, King Edward VIII, abdicated to marry an American divorcee. Elizabeth's father became King George VI, and Elizabeth became first in line. As her country fought World War II, the young royal was thrust into another spotlight. She made her first radio broadcast to her country in 1940, a message of encouragement to children forced to leave their homes to escape the dangers of war.
And when peace comes, remember, it will be for us, the children of today, to make the world of tomorrow a better and happier place.
After World War II in 1947, Elizabeth gave England something to celebrate. She married Philip Mountbatten, a member of the Greek royal family. The following year, the first of their 4 children was born, Charles, the next Prince of Wales. Her father, King George, died in 1952. At 25 years old, Elizabeth became queen. Millions watched the first ever televised crowning of a British monarch. Queen Elizabeth worked with more than a dozen British prime ministers, beginning with Winston Churchill, and was head of state in 15 other Commonwealth countries. A series of royal dramas marked her reign. Her son Andrew's high-profile marriage to Sarah Ferguson failed. And in 1992, her oldest son, Charles, separated from Princess Diana. That same year, the Queen watched part of Windsor Castle go up in flames, destroying millions in art and furniture.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure.
In 1997, a car crash in Paris killed Princess Diana, stunning the world. Many criticized the Queen for not showing emotion. More than a decade later, the Queen celebrated a royal wedding as her grandson, Prince William, married Kate Middleton. The couple gave the Queen 3 heirs to the throne. Her Majesty marked 60 years on the throne in 2012 when 1,000 ships sailed the River Thames to honor her. And in 2016, Queen Elizabeth celebrated her 90th birthday. Thousands packed the streets of Windsor to catch a glimpse of the only monarch most had ever known. The Queen watched another tiny royal join the family after her youngest grandson, Prince Harry, married Meghan Markle. Just a few years later, the Queen lost her husband of 73 years. She called the death of Prince Philip a huge void in her life, but she carried on. And at 96 years old, celebrated her Platinum Jubilee. The week of fanfare and festivities marked the Queen's 70 years on the British throne. Ian Lee, CBS News, London.
I want to bring in CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge. Catherine, before coming to CBS News, you were a foreign correspondent based in London and covered Queen Elizabeth and the royal family. As a journalist, what stories and memories have stayed with you?
Well, Nicole, I first arrived in London in 1987. That was my first job in television. I stayed there until around 1998. My last big assignment was the French investigation into Princess Diana's death. And this was a period of tremendous personal disappointment for Queen Elizabeth. Her children's marriages collapsed in a very public way, and they ended in divorce. And we used to have an expression among the journalists who covered her that there were really 3 Ds. There was duty, dignity, and then also decency. And those were the central or sort of foundational qualities that really helped Queen Elizabeth help the monarch become sort of more transformative after those disappointments.
Yeah, and if you can dive deeper into that, because one of the most trying years for Queen Elizabeth was in 1992. How did the family come through it?
Well, there's that very famous phrase, annus horribilis, which is Latin for a terrible year. And 1992 really was a terrible year for Queen Elizabeth. Again, all of these very personal disappointments with her children, and then also the fire at Windsor Castle. I was a very young TV reporter at that time and went out to Windsor Castle where you could see the flames. And what struck me is that there was a really human side of the royal family that came out. You could see this human chain of people, and they were literally handing one to another these incredibly priceless pieces of artwork, and they saved many of them. I remember seeing Prince Andrew in that chain, and in some ways, after the fire at Windsor Castle, which is really the heart, sort of the heart in her homes, they were able to start to rise from the ashes in a lot of ways. That was really an event where we started to see real and sort of constructive change and a recognition that the monarchy really had to modernize in this new era.
And talk more about the late Queen's tremendous reach and bond with the Commonwealth. How did that manifest itself, and how might that evolve with King Charles III?
Well, I grew up in a Commonwealth country, and I can tell you that when the Queen came to where I lived in the late 1970s, we all dressed up in our best clothes, and we went downtown and we lined the streets for the walkabouts, which in those days they really walked about and got into the crowd. There weren't the same security concerns. So the Queen has been sort of that connective tissue between all the Commonwealth nations. And this is really a testing time for the Commonwealth, because it's now, in a very public way, having to address issues of bias and discrimination and slavery. And these issues are very much on the table for King Charles, who will take over the mantle from his mother.
And Catherine Herridge, thanks so much for sharing your experience.
You're welcome.
That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/redandblue.
An original CBS Reports documentary.
This place is at the very tip of the spear when it comes to Satanism and witchcraft and demonism.
Has the church been this divided?
Not in my lifetime. They've been radicalized in their approach to politics.
United in Christ, divided by politics.
We have what I call a cowardly pastor problem, because they don't want to get involved in the political situation.